Shirt, Untuckit.com, code HERD, 20% off. Fall arrivals are in. Untuckit.com, code HERD. Well, a young man who may be humbled by the Houston loss, my friend Nick Wright, via the Coward Global Satellite Network in New York. So, a team that Harden leads and does some ISO stuff went all in ISO. And Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith were showing literally on TNT the shot clock and saying, listen, there's 18 seconds. Nobody else has touched it. Are you humbled this morning realizing that your Rockets are a one-trick pony and they're facing Copperfield over here?
Listen, I don't know when I became the Herd's resident Rockets fan, but I had lived there for 5 years. I know some members of the team in the front office, so I'll own it to a degree. I think you're a little too hard on Mike D'Antoni this morning, but I also think Mike D'Antoni is not being totally honest about what happened in Game 1. The Rockets do isolate more than any team in the league. This year, according to Second Spectrum, they led the NBA with 22 isolations per game.
Yeah.
That's not what happened in Game 1, though. Game 1, they had 45 isolation plays. That's not only double their average, that's more than any team in any game in 5 years.
Yikes.
So when Mike D'Antoni says we're going to do what we do, I've got no problem with the Rockets doing what they do. But Game 1 wasn't what they do. Game 1 was what they do on steroids, and against a great defense, that isn't going to work. I would like to see the Rockets try to do what they do tonight in Game 2, but that wasn't it in Game 1.
By the way, I'm not much for math. I'm more of a talker than a numbers guy. I like words over numbers, but I'm good enough in math to know this. Cleveland would have to beat Boston 4 of 5 games with an inferior coach and a far inferior defense. I think the series is over. Do you?
I don't think this series is over, while I also didn't expect Boston to be up 2-0 at this point. You don't have to go way back in history. You just got to go back a couple weeks. Do you think Milwaukee's got a great roster? Do you think Milwaukee's got a great coach? Milwaukee lost the first 2 in Boston. Then they went to Milwaukee, and they won the next 2. Then they went back to Boston, and they lost. They went back to Milwaukee, and they won before losing in 7 games. I think when we talk next week, this series will be tied at 2 games apiece, and then you're in a best of 3 against LeBron. I think this is going to go to 7 games. Do you trust any of the Cavs in a road Game 7? Well, no, except for LeBron, who hasn't lost a Game 7 since you and I not only didn't know each other, but I think you were 2 jobs ago last time you lost a Game 7. So I don't think it's over. But I heard you're open. This idea that if LeBron puts them on his back and wins 4 of the next 5, which is what he would have to do to advance, you think that will be bad for him?
Yes. I think, honestly, when guys like you and I mean, let's be honest. You and I love basketball and I have for 4 decades, you have for 2 to 3. You have to constantly remind people, Jordan was 1-9 before Pippen arrived in the playoffs. It literally doesn't exist. You can't find tape of it because all we get is 6 for 6. Nobody remembers Bill Russell winning the Eastern Conference Finals. If LeBron gets gassed in this series, 30 years from now, we're like, hey, how about that Sixer LeBron run? I think if you're going to lose, don't lose in the finals because that stuff sticks 20 years later.
Well, you might be right about how people will evaluate it, which speaks to the absurdity of how we're evaluating it. If you are one of the people, you, the generic you, not you, Colin Cowherd, who just shout about LeBron's finals record, 3-5 in the finals, 3-5 in the finals, what you are saying is tonight, because I think everyone agrees, if the Cavs win this series, they will be a drastic, enormous underdog to Golden State or to Houston. You are arguing that it is better for LeBron's historical profile to lose in this round than to win in this round. It is better if LeBron plays poorly and they lose than plays great and they win. And I just have to reject the logic of that. It's why if you want to talk about Jordan's 6 championships to LeBron's 3 championships, I'll listen to that. But I am not interested in finals losses any more than I'm interested in first-round losses or second-round losses or third-round losses. It is an accomplishment every round you win in the playoffs. And when you're talking about 20 years from now. I would hope sports fans will continue to become more sophisticated. Once upon a time, when you were starting off in the business, Colin, all people cared about with pitchers was number of wins they had. And then people realized, well, that's kind of dumb because you can allow 1 run in 9 innings and get a loss. You can allow 4 runs in 5 innings and get a win. Hopefully people will continue to become more sophisticated and realize, oh, wait, reaching an NBA Finals is an accomplishment, more so than getting knocked out in the conference finals or the second round. The idea that LeBron would be penalized for carrying this team to the NBA Finals is the height of absurdity.
I want to show you, you can't see it where you're at, but it's a pie chart. And I think last night was actually a bad night for the city of Cleveland. One, LeBron now leaves. You're like, well, of course, the guy was Superman and he couldn't win a series against Brad Stevens and kids. And two, the lottery pick gave him number 8, which is not much of a pick. Frankly, it is in the NFL. It's not. It is in baseball. Right. It is in hockey. It's not in basketball. I believe the pie chart is now 50% Lakers, 40% Cavs, 10% other team. I don't think I've ever asked you this. Where do you think, if he loses this series, because we know when he feels when he's with an old roster and he feels trapped, he pushes the ejector button. Where do you believe if he loses this series, he ends up next year?
Listen, here's my issue with the pie chart. Win, lose this series, win or lose in the finals. The odds of him staying at Cleveland should be 0% on your pie chart. He's leaving. He's gone. Cleveland, somehow, Dan Gilbert, doff your cap to you, sir. You have somehow blown having the greatest player in world history on your team twice. You've done it twice. And you mentioned the 8th pick. They should have known this was likely going to be the 8th pick. When they traded for the Nets pick, we knew there were 5 or 6 teams in the league that would actively try to tank. We also knew the Nets stunk, but because they didn't have their own pick, they would not try to lose games. So they knew when they traded for it, they knew headed into the deadline, this is probably 90%, as it was going into last night, going to be somewhere between the 6 to 10 range. That is exactly where it fell. It is why them trading for taking an inferior package from Boston because, it's going to include our future after LeBron was absurd. It's why at the trade deadline, not dangling that pick to get LeBron more help was absurd. Your future after LeBron, Cleveland, is going to be the exact same as the entirety of your history except for the 11 years he's been there. Total Travis Shamockery embarrassment. You have no future after LeBron. Mo Bamba, Trae Young, or Colin Sexton aren't going to change that. So the idea that you had to keep this Nets pick as if it were likely to turn into Luka Doncic or DeAndre Ayton was always silly. They blew this from the beginning of the offseason. When they traded Kyrie, when they didn't bring back the GM, when they held onto this pick as if it represents some future. LeBron's gone. No matter what happens, he's gone. Where will he go? I'd say Philly's the leading contender, then LA, then Houston. But Cleveland has as much a chance of signing him as the Herd does.
I'd put him on the couch every segment. You know that. First things first.
Oh, yeah.
He's the co-host. He's Nick Wright. Good talking to you, bud.
Good talking to you, too. See you, bro.
All right, 2 things. We got 2 things coming up. Number 1, God, is there an NFL team, and a great one, setting themselves up for a massive, massive piece of humble pie? That's number 1. Number 2 is, to prove that LeBron is all good, I'm going to give you a list, and you'll find it hard to believe. Those 2 stories coming up next. 66% of men lose their hair by age 35. Thing is, when you start to notice it, it's too late. It's easier to keep what you have than to replace what you've lost. That's where the site 4hims.com comes in. It's a one-stop shop for hair loss, skin care, and sexual wellness for dudes. Thanks to science, baldness can be optional. 4hims connects you with real doctors and medical-grade solutions. No snake oil pills, no gas station counter supplements, no awkward doctor visits. Right now, for $5, you get a free trial at 4hims.com. While supplies last, just go to the website, 4hims.com. Would cost you hundreds if you went to a doctor or a pharmacy. 4hims.com/Colin. FORMIHIMS, forhims.com/Colin.
Diego.